Hey everyone, welcome back to my Loom kitchen, and today I'll be showing you how to make this Loom Piña Colada. It's fairly easy to make, maybe just a little time consuming because it is quite large. This creation does need stuffing, and other than that it stands on its own. Please don't limit yourself to just using yellow bands for a Piña Colada. This could be any other drink that's served in this type of hurricane cocktail glass. For the garnish portion, I'll be showing you how to make this little cherry on top of a pineapple chunk, but you could garnish it with any of the previous garnishes I made on my previous Loom cocktails. Like this leaf, for example, is on my Loom mimosas. The link under this video should take you to the recipe page where I listed down all the number of bands needed for this creation, as well as the links to my previous garnish tutorials. So check that out, come back, and let's begin. So I'm going to show you how to make a cherry attached to a pineapple chunk. Take your loom, remove your center row. We'll be working on 2 rows, and you could have your rows facing in opposite directions if you find it easier. Now you take 2 of your cherry bands and exit out from the first to the second row, or the front to the back row. Another 2, X'd over here. Now I take 2 bands on the top, 2 bands laid down below, and 2 bands on the sides. Now you're going to lift the lower 2 bands on all 4 pegs, and you're left with 4 bands on each peg. Now from these 4 bands we'll extend to 6, and it should be this band here. So from this peg, just pick up those top 2 bands, bring it here, and on this upper left top 2, bring it there. Then again, lay down double bands on the top portion. Bottom portion. Then the sides. Now we're going to lift lower 2 bands here, lower 2 here, and lower 4 here. Same, lower 2, lower 2, lower 4. So after that round on 6 pegs, we're going to go back to 4 pegs. So on this extended peg, take those top 2 bands again. Just bring it back here. And the lower 2, where the other end is coming from this area, just bring it back here. Same with this extended side. Upper 2 coming from here, so place it here. Opposite. Lower 2, bring it opposite here. Now we're going to lay 2 bands on the top, 2 bands below, and 2 bands on the sides. Now we'll be lifting 6 bands, the lower 6 bands on all 4 pegs. We're going to end up turning this inside out when we remove it from the loom. So you can either do it before or after. Now we're going to remove this, the bands on this peg, and the bands on the peg next to it. And you can kind of push your cherry out. If you want to keep less bands on your hook, you can take the set of the bands in the front and just pull it through a set of bands in the back. So it's just less bands left on your hook. Now I turned it inside out. Now pick up the bands on the last two pegs. And that's, you have your little cherry. If you want to lessen the bands again, I'm just going to pull in the first set of bands through all the other bands on my hook. That way. Then you can tie that off with a single pineapple colored band. And just set that aside. Let's make the pineapple chunk now. You'll need your loom. You will be using 3 rows. If you could just set your rows straight. We'll be using 8 pegs. So from the pegs with the open portions facing towards you, just count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we'll be using from this set all the way down. So you take your pineapple color, 2 bands, and you just go down each row. Just repeat that on all 3 rows, double bands. Now we're going to put crossover bands, single yellow bands. 1, 2, 3. Keep this, the 4th one, blank. And 1, 2. Then you're going to add cap bands on the end, single band, wrapped twice on each peg below. So now we're going to loop all 3 rows up, only up to here, till the portion without the crossover band. Hook through and up, go through those cap bands, pick up the lower bands, loop it up. Now you're going to take your cherry and you're going to place that holding band where attached to the cherry end over here. Now you're gonna go on this, loop it up, go through, and loop that up. Now let's go in the center, go through, loop that up here. Let's move the cherry back, go through, loop it up here. Now let's go to this row, loop it up here, go through, loop it up here. Now let's just continue to loop up all 3 rows from where we left off. Okay. Now we're going to pick up the ends, and I'm going to slip a single band through all those row ends just to make sure they stay together. I'm going to slip knot it, and you can help the rest of your loom. Now we're going to go to this end and put your hook through all the cap bands. Now take a single band and pull that through, slip knot that together. Now you have it looking this way. You're going to fold. So after you fold it, you're just going to take both ends of your knot and you're just going to tie it together. Tie it together, then you can just hide your tails in. So that's your pineapple chunk with your little cherry on top. Now just set it aside for later. So let's start with our drink, and let's go back to using our loom with the middle row removed. We'll be working on a total of 16 pegs. That's 8 pegs on each side. So let's start here. Take 2 bands of your drink color, another 2, and another 2, and take 2 bands and make a cap band, wrap it twice. Now you're just gonna loop it up, put your hook through, pick up the lower two bands, now you're gonna lift those three, don't lift the cap band yet, and you're gonna count 8 on the other side. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This on the 8th peg over there. Let's just repeat that. 2 bands, 2 bands, pick up that cap band, 2 bands, and let's just return that cap band. Place that cap band back and loop it up again. Pick it up, place it here. So just continue doing that method until 8 pegs are filled on the other side. So this is the last row for the 8th peg on the other side. If you don't want to lift your center or your center cap band, just pull the 2 in, pull it through the center, and hook it onto that peg, bring it up. So we have 8 pegs filled up on one side. It's your center cap band. Now let's fill up the ones on this side. So 2, 2. If you find that the bands are pulling it too much and you're afraid you might break your loom, you can just put your hook through the center and pull the 2 bands through, then attach it to that peg and just hook it up. Now we're gonna fill up 8 here, but let's bring this first one to this side. Get the lower portion out of the way. my hook through the center, pull those 2 bands through, just loop these 2 up. Let's move this down here. Another 2, hook through the center, pull those 2 bands through, one end here, over, then loop that other 2 sets up. Two, two, hook through the center, pull it through, move it down here. Two, hook through the center, attach it here. Now a few more pegs. Hook through. Here. Now if you have no more pegs to use, you can just put your hook to the center and chain it by hook. Pull 2 bands through. Grab another 2 bands. Pull it through. Another 2 bands. Pull it through. Here. And one last peg, center. Pull 2 bands through. Another 2 bands. Pull through. And the last pair of 2 bands. And attach to that last peg. So we've covered 8 pegs on each side. push everything down. We're going to be making the glass rim now, and our glass rim will be done in two parts. We're going to add a short base on the loom, and then later on we're going to extend the height of that glass rim by hook. So before we begin the base, I want to add my pineapple chunk in. So I'm just going to place my hook through an area, and I'm going to lift the two bands on top on this peg, which happens to be the other end of the two bands left on the peg when you lift it up. And I'm just going to pull those two bands through my chunk. And I'm going to put it back on, just like that. So now we're going to add a base for your glass rim. So two glass bands, and just exit out on top of the drink portion all around the 16 pegs. So on top of that crossed out glass base, we're going to add two more bands. Just lay them straight all around the 16 pegs. Now on each side, we're going to ignore the yellow drink bands below, and we're just going to lift the lower four glass rim bands on each peg. Okay, I have to hide the tail of my chunk. I can fix that later on. So after that one layer of the glass band, we're going to go back to the drink portion, and we'll go back to the glass portion again later on. Now you're just going to lift all the drink bands up and over. So on 16 pegs, we're going to go 2 rounds of double bands. 1 round means lay your double bands all around the 16 pegs. Then after that round, you're going to lift all the lower bands up and over, leaving only 4 bands on each peg. Preferably when you lay your bands on the top portion and the bottom portion first and make the sides last. So it's easier for the increase and the decrease of the sides. This is round 1. So if you could pause your video and finish up this first round on the 16 pegs and then do one more round after. Unpause when you're done and we'll resume from there. We're done with the 2 rounds on the 16 pegs and we're going to decrease now to 14 pegs. So if you lay down your side bands last, we're going to decrease from here, and the top 2 bands on this peg should be this band. So just take the top 2 and place it here, which is opposite from here, and get the lower 2, bring it here, push it down. Now on this peg, the top 2, bring it here, lower 2, bring it here. So now we're going to lay double bands again. On the 14 pegs. So let's do the bottom or the top rows before the sides first. This is the first round. And on the 14 pegs, we're going to need a total of 5 rounds. Okay, now let's do the sides. This is round 1 on 14 pegs. So in the areas where you decreased, you'll be lifting 6 bands up and over, while the rest you'll be only lifting the lower 4 bands. We'll be needing a total of 5 rounds on 14 pegs. So pause your video, finish up this round 1, and do 4 more rounds after for a total of 5 rounds on the 14 pegs. Unpause when you're done and we'll resume from there. After the 5 rounds on your 14 pegs, your creation should look a little bit like this, and it's sticking out on the bottom. So you can push it up so it'll be easier to keep your loom straight down. Just be careful not to push it off the loom. We'll adjust the top portion later. Let's just finish the body first. So after 14 pegs, we're now going to go back to 16 pegs. So on this peg, we're going to extend these top 2 bands, which should be these bands. Pick up the top 2, move it here. Same on this side. Top 2, move it here. If you notice, I'm mixing yellow colored bands. You don't need to mix. You could keep it one color. I just don't have enough of the same shade of yellow, so I'm using a lighter yellow on top and it's going to mix into a darker yellow below. So we're back to 16 pegs, and this time we're going to need 10 rounds. So 10 rounds on these 16 pegs, and lay your bands, your double bands, on the top and the bottom rows first before the sides. And sides last. So this is the first round on 16 pegs. Lift all the lower bands up and over, leaving only 4 rounds on each peg. These are the bands that you just laid out. So if you can pause your video and finish up this first round and continue to make 9 more rounds after for a total of 10 rounds on these 16 pegs. So unpause when you're done and we'll resume from there. We finished 10 rounds on the 16 pegs, and your cocktail should look like this. So at this point, I like to try stuffing before we go any further, so it's still easier to reach the areas inside. So we've stuffed this a little bit, and before we continue on with the body, I wanted to break the monotony and do the glass rim on top. So you take two of your glass bands, and if you look at the top portion, you have like a flat chain. You're going to put your hook through the outer two bands of that chain, pull two glass bands through, and create a slip knot. Then you're going to go through that same chain, pull two glass bands through. So you have 6 rounds on your hook. Now you take the 2 rounds in the front and you're going to pull that through the back too. So on every chain, you're going to go through it twice doing that slip knot method. Next chain, pull those 2 bands through, slip those 2 front bands on your hook through the back 4. Go through that same chain again. There. So just continue doing that all around. It's also during this point that I'm going to add another type of garnish on the drink top portion, and I have my leaf garnish, which I was planning to add somewhere, maybe here. This is my leaf garnish in my mimosa tutorial. The link for this is on the recipe page, but so I'll get to this later. I'll just finish up my rounds. So just repeat that whole process of the slip knot. You're going through that chain on top of your drink, and you have to go through each chain twice. Okay, I'm at this point where I wanted to add my leaf garnish over here. So I'm about to put in another two glass bands. So I'm going to have my hook through that chain portion on top of my drink, and I'm going to put my hook through that leaf, and I'm going to pull two glass bands through. And those two glass bands go through that rim chain. And now to get the other end of those glass bands, I have to go through my leaf again. And pull that through. Then I just continue to put the first two glass bands on my chain through the back four. There. Then continue on to the next chain. And just finish off the rest of the rim, the remaining portion. Same method. This is the last. This is the last chain. Go back in one last time. That's it. I'm just going to place it on that first chain, single band, pull that through both. Oops. Single band, put it through both, and just tie that off. Just hide your tail. Adjust your garnishes later. Let's push our stuffing to the top. You can see. There. So that's our rim with our additional garnish. And of course, you can use any other garnish. I have links to every garnish I have for all my other cocktails on the recipe page. There. So let's continue on with the drink body. From the 16 pegs, we're now going to decrease to 14 pegs. So on this peg, take the top two bands, here, which should be the set of bands here if you laid down your bands on the sides last, and should extend here since the other end is coming from here. Now the lower two back there. Let's do the same here. Top two, move here, lower two back here. Like have 2 rounds on these 14 pegs. Now lift all the lower bands up and over. On the pegs we decreased, there should be 6. Everything else should be 4. One last round on the 14 pegs. Lift everything up. Okay. We're actually almost done, but before we decrease again, I would suggest you could stuff it more because it will be difficult as the hole gets smaller. Okay. From the 14 pegs, we're now going to decrease to 12. So on this extended peg, pick up the upper 2 bands and bring it here, opposite of where it comes from, and lower 2 here. Same on this peg, upper two bands. Lower two here. So let's do our round two bands. Lift all the lower bands up and over. There should be 6 on the corners where we decreased and 4 on all the other pegs. One last round. Okay. Let it decrease to 10. So from this peg, let's pick up the upper two bands, which should be this extended band. Lower two, bring it back here. It's the same here. Upper two. You can stuff it again before you start. So we're going to do one round on these 10 pegs. Lift all the lower bands. Okay. Our last step, decrease to 8 from the 10. So on this extended peg, pick up the upper two bands, which should be this band here, the side, lower two, on this side, upper two bands, go here, lower two, I'm going to stuff it one last time. Now let's do one last round before we close this. Lower bands up and over. Okay. Now let's close this by laying down single bands all around. Now lift all the lower bands up and over, and you'll be left with 2 bands on each peg. Now we're going to close from here, but first we're going to go across to this peg. So hook through, pick up the lower of the 2 bands, and bring it over to your starting peg. Now hook through, push back those upper 2 bands, pick up this lowest band, and move it forward here. Hook through, push back the upper 2, lowest band, move it forward here. So all this, let's just repeat that all around. Hook through, lowest band, it's the last, bring to your starting. Now place your hook through that starting peg. Pull a single band through and tie it off. You can help that off. So before we get to the base portion, which we'll be adding by hand, just reshape it. You can move your stuffing around inside, like bring the neck portion a little tighter by squeezing it here and distributing the stuffing to shape it the way you want. And we are almost done, so we just need to add our base. We're now going to begin with the base of the glass, which will look like this. If you look at the bottom, we'll be working with the 8 ridges here. Place your hook through one ridge. Take 2 glass bands, pull it through, slip knot. This is the same method as what we did for the rim. Go through again. Go back to that same ridge, pull another 2 glass bands through. With the 6 bands on your hook, you pull the first 2 bands closest to the end through the back 4. Now we're just going to repeat that, going through each ridge twice. So hook through. It's the last ridge. Going in it one last time. So you have your first round. Now we're going to make the second round. So just go back through with your last 2 bands on your hook. Go back through the first single band, pull it through, and create a slip knot. Now we're gonna go do our second round. So from the first round, you're just gonna go to, you see the chain on top, the outermost 2 bands on each chain. So go through that first single bands, and same process but with single bands. So the first band closest to the end of your hook goes through the back 2, and go through that same chain again. So you're just going to go through each chain twice. with single bands. Last chain. You can do it this way. You can choose to, so when you're in your last chain, just go back through that first chain again. Single band. Tie it off, slip knot. So you can choose to leave it at this size, or you can choose to make it, to extend it one more. Like over here, I have 2 rounds. So if you do 2 rounds, so from your last one, you just go back through that outermost chain again. I'm just going to repeat the same thing. Going twice through each chain with single bands. This is our last. Okay, and now I'm just going to hide this tail. I'm going to create a slip knot. Make sure I tie this off properly. Just going to hide that off. That's it. So I hope you like it. Enjoy your Piña Colada.